Hey, here we are. We just go live here. There's
Hello.
Hey, no preamble.
So I am here with Sable Phoenix, expected guest. I am here with Heath, special guest.
Good evening, everyone.
I am not here with Doug because Doug is unfortunately unable to make it, but it's not due to anything bad. I don't want to really be too public with his business, but something great happened and he now can't make the evening, so it's not a bad thing. We'll miss him, but we hope he has fun where he is. So I want to first of all, publicly, I want to say, because this is something I've addressed to Heath before now in private. I don't think I've ever asked him on the channel, and if I had, it was sort of like very like loosey goosey, not really anything concrete. And it's because I assumed that he was just busy. He's got a lot going on, and I didn't want to be like pestering him, kind of like, hey, do you want to show up? Hey, do you want to come and talk about this? Do you want to talk about that? And so what ended up happening is that I erred on the side of just not saying anything, and that I feel like was a dire oversight, and I apologize, Heath. You're one of the biggest inspirations for me even doing this stuff. And I think that was it was just a big old miss, and I owe you a very large apology.
Well, for that. No, that's no problem. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the offer to come on here. This is a movie that is very influential on me, and I wanted to actually, this is the first time that I've watched this movie. I've been meaning to watch it again, but it's the first time I've watched this movie since I was probably in 4th or 5th grade.
Wow.
And I watched it again. I've been looking for a reason to watch it again because it is influencing a story that I'm going to be writing starting in November again, or rewriting in November.
That's awesome.
And so I was like, all right, let's go ahead and do it because I got to watch this movie again. And so this was the reason to get it done.
Sweet.
Well, I'm happy for that. And I feel like this movie is it fits neatly into the category. It's exactly how you remember it, right? Like, regardless of how long it's been since you've seen it, maybe not, I don't know. But it feels to me, and I've seen it since I saw it for my first time when my father first showed it to me. But like, my mom got mad at him because there's gore in it, but whatever. Go ahead.
Well, I was saying, but I also really appreciate this because I love to see our network growing. So, James, you have been a constant commenter and presence in the live streams on the Heath Geekverse channel, the Table Talk channel, and now you're starting your own channel, and you've been extremely successful with it, getting going with it. And the same way with Sable Phoenix, who is now known as the Titterpig Rancher, getting his channel going too. And so I think it is fantastic that we are actually developing our own little network here. I love that.
I agree. I quite like that too.
The whole reason we're here tonight is entirely because of Heath. It's the reason that I met James in the first place, and that we have been talking and collaborating and developing stuff. It caused me to bite. It caused bait. By the way, I'm sure that everyone in the chat is already familiar with who Heath is. If anyone is not, please go check out Table Talk Deep Conversations in the Geekverse, as well as Heath's Geekverse channels. And
those links should both be available in the description.
Exactly. And subscribe there, and then also his web series, the Cultists, a mockumentary about cultists just wanting to worship Cthulhu in a world that doesn't understand, and it's very funny and absolutely worth your time. And Heath, I came across Heath's channel almost 2 years ago now. Man, time flies. With the whole OGL thing. In a couple of months, it will be 2 years. When the whole OGL debacle happened, and he was one of the people who was able to interview
Jason,
the guy who created the OGL in the first place, among other people. And anyway, ever since then, we've been putting things together and inspiring each other to do more. So it's great. It's cool to have him here.
Yeah, it's really, really great to have him here, especially on this film. So I'm really.
Oh, excited. I didn't realize this is the first time I've been on this side. I didn't realize I wasn't connected to the chat. I said hi to everybody in the private chat. Hang on, I'm going to try to connect. Okay, hang on. I'm going to try to get running so I can be in the public chat. Okay, so I see everybody now. Hey, PH. Hey, Jay. Hey, everybody, hang on. All right, I got to connect something to get into this.
Yeah,
All right,
Charlie,
all right.
PH, Jason 96, hopefully more.
Good.
Yes, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching.
I didn't know that it puts you in the private chat by default. Oh,
yeah.
I don't know if that's a setting that I can mess with or if that just happens. If it's a setting I can mess with, I mean, I've never touched it.
I've actually never used the comment chat in the StreamYard. I always open up the actual stream in another window and just.
Hey, Charlie, we got Charlie here too. Hey.
Yeah. Charlie Gardner, yeah. Good to see everyone.
Yeah, it is. And again, thank you all for being here. So we're going to discuss Dragonslayer. It is ILM's first film outside of Star Wars. So this is the very first thing. It uses Phil Tippett's Go motion animation to get Vermithrax Pejorative doing what it does, which is a kind of a neat little tidbit of the evolution of special effects. And it was an absolute bomb at the movie theater, though. The box office did not treat it well. But it has since become a cult classic. Mm-hmm. As is typical, I like to start with theme. So I don't know if either of you have anything prepared with regard to what you have what you've interpreted the theme of the film to be. But I do, and I would be happy to let either of you begin by naming the theme, if you have that. And if you don't, I'll do it.
I'll be happy to start off, I guess.
All right, go for it.
First off, this movie is very underrated, I think. It's definitely it almost feels like a throwback to an older style of storytelling. It has a very, I don't want to say fairy tale feel to it, although in a lot of ways that is the case. But it also has a very Arthurian feel to it. Its main theme is not all that subtle. It's about the supplantation of the old ways by Christianity. It like takes place on the cusp of transition from the old ways to the new, where Christianity is just starting to spread into whatever the country is, the stand-in for the British Isles, basically.
I think more broadly, if I can interrupt for a moment.
Go for it.
I think more broadly, I agree with you. I agree with everything that you just said. More broadly, I would say that it is the supplantation of the old with the new. I think that in this particular regard, it just happens to be Christianity, and it makes for a very apparent sort of theme. So I don't necessarily think that it's Christianity. I mean, specifically, it is in the film, in the story. But the theme overall, in a more general sense, I would at least say that it's the supplantation of the old with the new.
It is that, but it is also a an allegory towards the rise of civilization, so to speak, insofar as that, like right at the end, both Valerian's father and then later on Valerian, as they're leaving, they both express that they are glad that the amulet's gone, the dragon's gone, all of the magic is leaving, that the last sorcerer has died, yes. That the magic is leaving the world. And they're doing that because they were the ones who were under the heel of those things, right? They were the ones who suffered the most. And now a new age of civilization is starting. Christianity is presented as toothless, but yet it is also kinder to those underneath its influence.
There's a lot of that. And I think that it has to do. Well, we'll get into it. We'll get into it.
We can get into deeper analysis. I'm just these are the layered, because there are layers of themes going on in this. It's not just a straight B movie. Yes, it's cheesy. Yes, the acting is not great. The dialogue doesn't always land. Like, it's definitely a B movie. Mm-hmm. It feels like an 80s fantasy film. It feels like Conan the Barbarian.
It does. And
it feels like Cull. It feels like the Beastmaster. It feels like all those, right?
It does.
But
and
it feels a little
elevated. I think that there's something to that provides a timelessness to the theme in and of itself, because it is a demonstration of the theme. But Heath, do you want to comment toward the theme? If you have any ideas on maybe a different theme or agree.
Yeah, I was trying to think about this in terms of when we talk about theme. I often really like to think about that in terms of Drake's idea about the question that's being asked, and
central interrogation.
I didn't actually, so that didn't jump out at me as I was watching it, and I was trying to think of, so what is, looking back, like what is the central question? We're like, okay, what's going to triumph over the other? I'm not sure. So the idea, I almost think we need a different word for what Drake is talking about, which I think is so powerful. And then because we use the same word theme for it, because so Christianity is there, and I do really that's very interesting. You're talking about the toothlessness of Christianity in the face of this dragon. And I think it's interesting that we bring a sorcerer to handle this dragon rather than a warrior. I mean, that's non-standard.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
But then also because the dragons, they outright say the reason the dragons exist was because the sorcerers did, and now there's only one dragon now because there's only one sorcerer,
and also only one sorcerer. Yeah.
So I'd be very interested to hear. One of the things that I wanted to ask both you guys is what you think. Oh, by the way, I've been calling what you were just talking about, Heath. I've been calling that the central interrogation of whatever the story is. It's different than theme. It's my favorite stories of all time have a very explicit, or at least very discernible central interrogation. I always bring up Babylon 5. Who are you? What do you want? I always bring up Planescape Torment. What can change the nature of a man? I like to bring up Arcane as one of the most recent. Is can a monster be saved? These are all central. They may not be specifically or explicitly stated within the story in and of itself, but they are the questions that the creators of the stories were grappling with in this creation, right? So, but I also wanted to ask both of you what you thought Vermithrax Pejorative, the dragon, actually represents thematically in the film.
I will get to that if you give me one moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
PH Arbeck says it was groundbreaking at the time. I think they blend stop motion with animation and a blur effect.
Yes.
Like that they did.
That's what's called go motion.
Phil Tippett created a technique at the time called go motion.
Right.
Yeah, they actually animate the model in front of the camera to create motion blur.
They created for the Skinwalkers in The Empire Strikes Back just the year before.
Yes, exactly. And this is ILM's first foray into film outside of Star Wars, and so it was sort of an evolution of what they were doing. So it was crucial in their learning process, and it was very foundational to ILM as they progressed in their technologies.
And in general, it still looks great.
Oh, it really does. It really does.
Other than the absolutely egregious matte lines, but I mean it was just after the turn of the 80s, so can't get rid of those yet.
So thematically, what does Vermithrax Pejorative represent? Heath, you can take that first if you want, because I don't have anything ready at hand to say, but I can wing it.
No, I would have to wing it too, actually, on that question.
Well, I'll wing it then, because I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation. Okay. So I'll wing it first, and then we'll see what Sable has to say. But I was thinking, like this film hits me in a very, it hits me with broad generalities, and so Vermithrax Pejorative means the worm of Thrace who makes things worse.
Yeah,
I think that there is a little bit, and this is a conversation Sable Phoenix and I had. It could mean the gladiator worm, but I think specifically with regard to the theme and how Erland is a post-Roman society, and we're sort of transitioning away from that, and we're in the middle. Like the sorcerers still speak Latin, and that's an anchor into the past. And so everyone else has progressed beyond that. Like the ruling class still kind of learns Latin because the princess had that conversation with her. But it's definitely on the way out. And so I think that placing it in Thrace, placing it in the past with the Latin name is more, I think, it's more relevant to the theme of the whole film. So that's the interpretation I like to go with. It's not. It could be the gladiator worm that makes things worse. And that's a perfectly valid translation. I just prefer the Thracian interpretation because of the theme of the film. So if I'm interpreting what Vermithrax pejorative actually means, again, the film really hits me with a broad brush, with generality. It is. What is it? I mean, there's a duality there between the sorcerers and Vermithrax, and the sorcerers were sort of, at least insofar as is indicated in the film, they're come to for knowledge and for problem solving, and the dragon is causing problems. And so, like, there's a balance there, there's a duality, but like specifically, if you want me to name anything, Sable, I'm not really like prepared.
It's not a leading question. I'm just curious.
No. I don't. I don't think it's really necessarily something that I gave much thought to my chagrin. I mean, it's probably something I should have. It's the whole, damn antagonist. But is there something that you that you think that it represents?
I've been wondering. The best I can come up with at the moment, after watching the film a couple of times, I guess because I rewatched it twice. I watched it twice before we had the stream. I think so Vermithrax, if it is the worm of Thrace and it's 1,000 years old at this time, then it was obviously alive during the Roman Empire.
Yes.
And I think it is in some ways an analogy for the Roman Empire itself, because the Roman Empire.
Oh, okay.
The Roman
that's
Empire
that makes perfect sense.
Stretched its talons out all the way to reach the British Isles.
That makes perfect sense to me.
And when the sorcerer's looking at the scales, Ulrich's looking at the scales, he says, when a dragon gets this old, it knows nothing but pain. It becomes spiteful.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The Roman Empire didn't technically, it didn't vanish, right? It technically still existed in some form. The Byzantine Empire continued well past the sacking of Rome and the dissolution of the Senate and all the other stuff. And the influence, of course, never went away. Holy Roman Empire was not the Roman Empire, but there were continued threads that just went on, but it lost its cultural hegemony. It lost its dominant influence over the known world. And at this time, it would have been well into its decline. It still would have existed. People know what Rome was, and people still... At this time, the church obviously is on its ascendance in this fantasy representation of our history, and they would kind of try and take on the mantle of authority that the Roman Empire had, for better or worse, more or less successfully. But I also feel like in general, the people are glad that the magic is leaving the world, because it ground them under its heel. They were the ones who had to pay the prices for all of the games and excesses of those who could wield it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, in a lot of ways, it was a more barbaric time, despite the, at least this is what the film is saying, right? It was it was a more barbaric time, despite the grandeur and the spectacle and all of that kind of thing.
And the film even says as much in the opening when Ulrich is saying, he brings up the lottery and says barbaric.
Yeah,
that exactly. Lottery is definitely a vestige of a more barbaric time. So if we're saying that Rome this is a post-Roman society, so Rome would be what's in the past, what exists here. The lottery sort of represents that and that barbarism. So it says as much in the film.
It's an interesting, like the film is actually extremely complimentary, thematically at least. I don't know if this was intended. Thematically, it's extremely complementary to Christianity and to organized religion in general, but Christianity in specific.
Yes.
Because even though they are toothless, they have no power to stop this old tyrant, right? They are ushering in a world where that tyrant can no longer exist, and where the people are not as beholden to the whims of the elite and to the whims of the powerful.
Yeah, it becomes the people for the government to the people, ostensibly. I agree with that. And there's a lot of transition that happens in the film, right? So, like, there is this idea that the dragon's defeat marks the end of an era, but the dragons, first of all, the film's called The Dragonslayer, right? And you initially feel like that's Peter McNichol's character, right? Galen is the Dragonslayer. He's the one that's on the quest.
Yeah.
He's the one that tackles the dragon, but he doesn't actually slay the dragon. And then he has a hand in it.
Sort of, yeah.
It's not his plan, right?
Right, yes.
But here's the thing. There are 1, 2, 3, at least 4 Dragonslayers in the film. There's Galen.
Yeah.
There's the spear called Dragonslayer. There's Ulrich, who is actually responsible for the death of the dragon. And then there's the king who takes and then also, I would say a fifth one, because the priests attribute Christianity and God to the one who slays the dragon. So there are 5 Dragonslayers in this film, which I think is very important in understanding the theme of leaving the past behind, because that's what's happening in every single one of these scenarios, right? So Ulrich is the past. He dies so that Galen then can move forward with his knowledge. Even though he isn't a sorcerer, he still has that experience that he can move forward with. Christianity is now supplanting an old world faith, or old world faiths. The king himself is, now that the dragon has died, he's going to be able to govern differently, because he doesn't have to worry about the lottery anymore, or the dragon swooping in to kill his people and destroy his crops. And Christianity is sort of just it kind of exists on the fringe for the whole film, but it's still a very important element, especially because we kind of watch Grail, a character named Grail, funny enough, develop into, he goes from the past, and he sort of, he every time we see him, he's taking the next step in a journey toward the future, and he ends up as a Christian priest. And he's the one at the end who attributes the slaying of the dragon to God.
Divine intervention, exactly.
Yeah, so it's a very it's an interesting film because it's called Dragonslayer. Well, it's an interesting film anyway, but this particular aspect about it is that there are 5 different nameable Dragonslayers in the whole movie, which again, it just kind of works into highlighting that theme of the past dying and the future, progressing forward from it. What's up, Heath? Got something to say? Heath?
Oh, you're muted. You're muted or on lag, or we can't hear you.
Yeah, I can't.
Oh, okay, no, go ahead with your analysis. No, that's been.
Well, that's all I got. I just wanted to make sure that we kind of like, because Sable started to get into the whole transition piece and whatnot. I wanted to really bring up the idea that there are 5 nameable Dragonslayers in a movie called The Dragonslayer.
Yeah, and good catch on the fifth one being Christianity as a whole. It's not really a connection I made, but it's definitely true. Again, it's creating a different world where those things can no longer exist.
Yes. Yes, which is an allegory for the human experience. So my favorite theme in all storytelling is this one. And it's because there is a melancholy in the honesty of naming. It's like the entirety of human experience is the world passing you by. Like, you are born, you grow up in a town that you watch. You probably have watched at this point in time, at least at people who are my age. Things change. Things are different. If you still live in that same town, the roads are different. The buildings are different. The businesses are different. I'm sure the schools are maybe different in a little bit way. But to someone like me who moved out of the town that he lived in, it's completely unrecognizable. You can't go back to that, right? You can never go back to the way it was.
Home again.
So the world teaches you certain things. Culture teaches you things. Education teaches you things that it then it blows past, right? So like you can't. There are things that you've learned in school. There are things that I've learned when I went to school. When I went to university, there were management classes. As far as I'm aware, those are largely irrelevant now, and they don't actually teach. There's no course track called management or business management in schools anymore. They've broken it down into different things. So like, I was taught something, and now the entirety of that portion of my education is essentially, I wouldn't say useless. I've learned some useful things that I can move forward with in my career, but like, it's really, it's the curse of being a human being, right? Like, you are constantly being passed by. The world is it's going to pass you by. It's your time for a very brief period, and then it's no longer your time anymore. And you kind of just watch it as it goes. And that's what this theme and that's what this film sort of represents to me. And it's why I like the theme. So it's why I like Cyberpunk so much, right? It's the rapidization of the world passing you by. And how are you supposed to deal with that? Which is it's a melancholy sort of theme to approach, at least I guess from the perspective that I have. But at the same time, it's very real. It's very honest. And I think it provides some measure of sobriety to the human experience. Like, it happens to everyone. It's happening to everyone. It's happening to us right now. The world is passing us by. It will pass us by. And I just really enjoy this theme because of how honest it is.
It's and it handles it because it treats it as a transition. Like, part of it is inevitable, just because humans are changing in general their society in this part of the world. So part of this is just intrinsic to that kind of change. This film handles the obviously the budget was far, far smaller. The effects are far less convincing for as good as they are for the time. But it handles everything about this theme far better than The Last Jedi did. Which The Last Jedi takes a postmodernist approach to the same theme and outright states, let the past die, kill it if you have to, but there's nothing to replace it.
Yeah.
It's like, just get rid of the past because the past was bad. And then what? There's no then what in postmodernist perspective. Whereas this is a recognition of the fact that intrinsic within humanity taking on a different worldview, that you gain it's generally an improvement in the status of like the common man. Like, it generally improves the lot of everybody it touches, but there is something that is lost. There is wonder and magic and the ability to do things that you couldn't, that the typical common man can't, which is like, it's like that whole how many times a day do you think of the Roman Empire meme? We ascribe this level of almost mysticism to this great power in the past, right? Look at all the things.
Right, and here's the thing about that, right? Like, myth used to be common among the typical human. Myth was it was an important part of existence. It's still an important part of existence. And I reviewed this, I think, in our last conversation, right?
Yes.
It's still an important part of existence, but in this modern age, we have to be complicit. It isn't just there anymore. We have to actively agree to myth in order to sort of recover and rediscover it.
That's a whole, boy, I could get into that. But it does remind me of one of the things I wanted to connect this discussion to as well, and that was whatever it's Bob from Xbox Live or whatever his.
Yeah, I love his channel. I don't agree with everything he says, but the one on myth is.
But the one on myth and the difference between the difference with how postmodernism treats fantasy.
Yes.
And where he talks about how archetypal fiction is a representation of the internal world. It is it is the actual characterization of psychological I don't want to say phenomena, but like the psychological aspects of the person.
We don't need the character's psychology exists in the external world. It's writ large across the entire setting, which is why we're able to approach those topics as we are in mythical stories.
Yes, and that is exactly what this film is doing too.
I agree.
And it's a far more fulfilling way to engage with this kind of story than it is to, like, it just goes to show how the people who are making modern day Star Wars movies fundamentally misunderstand the way that Star Wars functions, because Lucas created them as mythology, like they follow the mythological pattern.
Yes.
They're populated by characters who are ciphers, who represent certain aspects of psychology acting within the world. And it's that kind of archetypal storytelling, that's the reason it resonates so much and has so much power still even to this day, is because we see these characters, and even like we don't necessarily need their backstory, we don't need their trauma, we don't need their conflicted natures, we just need them to represent a thing.
Yes.
And that's what the characters in this story do 100%. None of them change throughout the story. They're all set on their trajectory. Heck, Galen doesn't even have a refusal of the call, even though this is a hero's journey story.
Right. Yeah.
But they, like, everybody starts the film on a particular trajectory, and they do not deviate with that trajectory until it's come to a conclusion.
Well, hold on a minute. I'm going to stop you there. I think he does have a refusal of the call. When Ulrich tells him to go and get the dagger, and then he locks him in the room, and he's panicking, and he wants to get out because he doesn't want Ulrich to die, that his reticence to accept Ulrich's death is, I would judge, the refusal of the call. Because were he able to act, right,
in hindsight,
he likely would have prevented it from happening.
Yeah,
he was locked in the room. Like Ulrich said, nope, you can't do that.
That's the reverse. He locks him magically in the tower to prevent him from acting.
Yes.
So he would have naturally acted.
Yes.
Whereas the refusal of the call is a go-to inaction.
I agree. So it is subverted.
It's the subversion of the trope is still the trope, like you already.
Subversion of the trope is still the trope.
Yes. I could concede that point. Sure. Yeah, I could.
I know this is going to be a harder sell for Heath. I know.
Yeah, that's hard. That was a harder sell. I'll think about it.
Well, that's totally cool. So, do you want to talk about that for a minute? Like what?
Well, I think what you guys are talking about, what I may talk about is not what you guys are talking about, because I think what you guys are talking about is very interesting. Because, so my experience with this film, this film has a tremendous amount of impact on me. Mm-hmm. I remember being invited, and I was like I want to say 4th or 5th grade. So I watched this movie the first time in 4th or 5th grade. Okay, it was probably about that time. Mm-hmm. My uncle invited me up to his house, and this was like a whole family affair. My mother and my younger brother also came with me, and this was going to be a whole extended family affair. We did this with a few different movies, including Baron Munchausen. But
what a great movie!
Yeah,
what a great movie!
Dragonslayer was one of them. There's like, all right, we're coming up to watch Dragonslayer, and so he has this big TV. We were gonna have dinner and have a snack, and then like it was a family event. We're going up to his house to watch this movie.
That's very cool.
So I watched this movie very early on, and it has a tremendous amount of when I think about what I remember, of course, the dragon. I remember the death of the sorcerer in the beginning and being shocked by that. And in fact, I'm thinking about that and saying that this is possibly the first like subversion of expectations, if you want to use that term. That I was like, okay, this wizard's going to go kill this dragon, whatever, and then he dies, in the beginning, right? So I remember that. I remember a hero with a spear. So this spear is going to become extremely influential in my thinking. A hero with a spear, and then when she tosses that shield down.
Yeah, that's a very hero-inspired.
Yes.
That is an extremely, I remember that forever. And like I said, these are actually things that are appearing in a story that I'm working on. And I had not rewatched this movie until today for this stream.
Can we say can I
have a
similar real quick how great Valerian is? Valerian's like best girl.
Yes, 100%.
Yes,
100%. I have a similar experience, but it's a lot more local and it's a lot more, I'll call it cozy. My father wanted me to see Dragonslayer. He had seen Dragonslayer. He wanted me to see Dragonslayer. How old would I have been at the time? I was probably somewhere around like 6 or 7, I would say. Maybe not 5, but 6 or 7. He wanted me to see, and I have very vivid memories of not the same things, but some similar things. So I have very vivid memories of the shape of the dragon's scales. I have vivid memories of the shield. I have vivid memories of the burning water. Something about that was very impressionable. The baby dragons eating the princess. Because
I think I wiped that from my memory.
That was horrific.
Yeah, it was that I had man, that one particular shot left such a huge impression on me. And I can't remember if this was like before or after I had accidentally seen John Carpenter's The Thing.
Gosh.
But I have very vivid memories of that. The lottery. So like stirring the lottery tiles, pulling the one tile, going back for another one, going back for another one. I had very vivid memories of these situations in my mind. They just really, really left a very lasting impression. And it hasn't been so long for me since I've last seen it, because I make a habit of watching and rewatching the movie, but I have that similar experience with like seeing it when I was younger. My father was the one who had me watch it. My mom got real angry at him because of that whole, she gets her leg gnawed off, right? And there's gruesome scene.
She's already dead, but one of the baby dragons chews her foot off.
Yeah, and it's like it's not just, you don't just see it with her foot in its mouth. You see it like go in for a bite at the ankle, and the flesh comes out in its mouth, and then the next time you see it, it's got her whole foot in its mouth.
It's a gruesome movie. Yeah,
it's a very very gruesome, and
there's some pretty hardcore deaths in it.
Yeah, and my mom really, I guess, didn't like that, but my dad
also that one
was fine, and I had already seen it by the time she got angry. So
also one brief scene of full male and female nudity. Yeah, it's a little blurry, but that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and this I think these are issues. Correct me if I'm wrong, if either of you know, because this movie was
rated PG.
It was rated PG. It was Paramount and Disney. Disney was involved in this too.
Disney, yes, Disney. This is a
Disney film,
right? So Disney didn't have the distribution rights in North America, which is why you can watch it on Paramount Plus, and that's why Paramount's name is on the DVD. But like Disney was definitely involved.
It was like international distribution or something.
Yes, something like that. But parents were, I think, pretty angry at how dark the whole film was, right? I mean, the theme is it's the theme in and of itself is, I don't want to say it's dark, but it's very honest, right? It's very real. There are broad applications with regard to the human experience, and it's not typical Disney, right? And then there's also the gore and also the nudity. So it's a very it was a very
briefly, it's like one scene, but still it's like
it's very quick.
It's out of nowhere.
But see, I was thinking, right? Yeah, PH says PG's in the 80s is not today's PG.
Oh, for sure.
This is absolutely
Is this before PG-13? Is this before?
Yes, it was. Yes, exactly. PG-13 was invented for movies like this.
Right.
Although even nowadays, it probably would still get an R.
But
maybe not. It doesn't have any language, so.
When I was rewatching this, because I have those iconic scenes in my mind that have been burned into my mind
Yeah.
since I was in 4th grade or something, because I didn't remember the whole movie, but I remembered those scenes that were so important.
Yes.
And this has become influential. This movie's been influential in a number of ways. Like in my notes, I was thinking, okay, I can see our influence on George R.R. Martin.
Yeah. Oh,
100%.
I was going to say
Absolutely.
that too.
Okay.
There's a Tyrion. There's a Valerian. There's a Valeria.
Valerian is in here. We have the dragon. So we have
absolutely.
But the fact that the dragons and magic are intrinsically tied to each other.
Yes. So we have all of that. And so in some ways, I know that that Doug and Retro Nerd Girl had just talked about Excalibur. To me, I put Excalibur and this movie in kind of the same category, and it's a movie that's kind of ahead of its time, and that it was trying to do something.
I would agree.
And so it attracted a group of people who want to see King Arthur and dragons and fantasy. So that's why it's a cult classic, because this is all there was. Like Excalibur and this movie, and like if you're trying to watch something like this, then and you're attracted to things like this, then you're like, oh my God, and that would have been my uncle, and so he would have been like, of course, he also liked aliens and all that, but he was like, okay, oh my God. He liked Lord of the Rings. He's the one who introduced me to The Hobbit, all of that. So I understand why he was drawn to Dragonslayer, and he wanted to be sure that I saw it. And my brother, who was younger than me at the time, also watched it when we all came up to watch it. So I understand, because of its theme and what it's trying to do, it attracted a particular audience, and that has become a touchstone for that core audience.
Yes.
But I couldn't help but notice as I was watching again, okay, why this movie actually doesn't work.
Right.
It could have been so much like, why is this movie not Star Wars?
Right.
Okay. I think
it has all of the elements, but it doesn't quite mesh.
It does not capitalize on them. So I think it would be a really interesting thing to study. What's the difference between the original Star Wars, now called A New Hope, and this movie? Because they could be very similar, and they could have been parallel in sci-fi and fantasy. But this movie doesn't work. Like I was very aware when I was rewatching it, based on all the study that we've done on story structure and the archetypes, things like, okay, this movie is not doing a lot of things that if it had done, it probably would have been much more successful with the general audience and could have been the fantasy Star Wars.
I think you're right, and I think it's because Star Wars is very, very character driven, and this film was not. As character driven. And so, like Galen he's a know-it-all and a jerk, right? Like, I'm not buying it. Like, I don't like the guy. He's a jerk to, what's his name, Hobb, I think, or Hodge, or something along those lines. Like, total jerk to that guy. He shows up and he's like, oh, well, now that my master's dead, I'm the one who's going to go on his quest. And it's like, bro, he literally just died. You just burned him. Are we not mourning at all for him? He was like excited that he gets to sort of go on this quest now because his master was dead.
Yeah, you get the impression that he's only there because he wants the power of the Megaster. Yes. And it doesn't really affect him so. I mean, Heath is exactly right, because Hobb gets shot and dies, and he's like, Hobb, no, don't die, oh no, and he tries to resurrect him and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't work and whatever else. And it's like he's like distraught about this, and that's kind of like supposed to be his big character change moment. But yes, we had no build up to that. He was essentially abusing the guy. Yes, just a scene before. Yeah, and it doesn't sell, right?
Well, anyway. Right. Like when I was rewatching this, the main character in here, is the definition of not motivated. Yes, if you're trying to motivate, I understand Luke Skywalker's motivation. He sees Princess Leia, a beautiful woman in danger. I'm going out there, and my father had been a great warrior and all of this. And man, in this movie, there is none of that. Like you need it. I'm like, okay, you need to, like, as an exercise in storytelling or whatever, we could come up with scene by scene and be like, okay, what do we need in Dragonslayer? We need him, our main character, to know that this beautiful woman is about to be eaten by the dragon, and that's going to motivate him to go and this man has no motivation to go kill this dragon. Like,
Even something as simple, and maybe we should do this. I would love to hear about all the ways that you can fix Dragonslayer, since that's something you've done with many movies already, Heath. But even as something as simple as taking the line where Ulrich says, Belisarius wore this, and I actually saw him change lead to gold. I could never do
that. Yeah.
You could do something as simple as having him say, I saw Belisarius used to wear this, and then you could have Galen say, I once saw him change lead to gold. And then Ulrich could admit, I was never able to do it. And you could show how devastating that might be to Galen, because he thought he was going to be studying with somebody who could teach him that level of power, right?
Yeah, I think
that would have tied into the theme of the past dying away too.
Like, don't get me wrong, I do love the movie. It's one of my favorite.
Sure, it's very enjoyable.
Catch me on a different day, and it might be my favorite fantasy movie of all time. But as I was telling you before we went live, there's baggage that comes along with that, right? It's not because it's a good movie. It's a fun movie. It's not a good movie. It's an awesome movie. Is what one of my friends likes to say. So it's not good. It's awesome, but I have that sort of that tie to my father and watching it for the first time.
Right.
So I have baggage that comes along.
That's what I was saying. There are other reasons why people love this movie and it becomes a touchstone movie. Yes. Because it's one of the only ones that were doing this genre and who did it. And I mean, the dragon is amazing and all of that. I mean, especially what was 1981 or whatever. I mean, so if you are tied into this genre and you want to see this kind of thing, yes. That's why it's influential on George R. R. Martin. That's why it's influential on me. Like I'm telling you, I got a hero with a spear, and that spear is absolutely influenced by what the spear looks like, and the shield that he wields. Absolutely so. That's why it's a touchstone. But there are reasons why it's not Star Wars. Some very fundamental storytelling reasons of why this.
There is a reason why it is a cult classic and why it is not a classic.
It is not. It is not. Right.
I think that definition that your friend has of it's an awesome movie, not a good one, is that is the definition of a cult classic right there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, So we do not have a motivated hero. The romance in this is also terrible. Like that's
it doesn't. Yeah.
The romance is. Have you seen? And maybe this is a movie we can talk about sometime on Table Talk or some other channel. The 1950s Ivanhoe is extremely influential on me as well.
I'd love to do a stream on Ivanhoe.
Okay, Errol Flynn's Robin Hood and Ivanhoe, the 1950s Ivanhoe movie, are extremely influential on me. And it strikes me that with this movie, we've got the two different heroines. The princess and the blacksmith's daughter, Valerian, whatever else. That's those could have been like the romance, like if we're trying to set up some kind of love triangle between those two. The example movie for that is Ivanhoe in the 1950s, when you have Rowena and then you have I'm blanking on her name, but the Jewess, Rebecca and Rowena. And there's a fantastic scene where Ivanhoe is going to have to go into battle for Rowena. For Rebecca. He's going to have to go into battle for Rebecca. And Rowena shows up and is like, do you do this because you love her? And he's like, no, I do this because of duty. And she's like, I'll know if you love her when I understand when love begins and duty ends. Or there's this, but we never get any kind of triangle or relationship between these two characters,
right?
Or these three characters. And it could have been there. And if you had done something like that, that would have elevated the storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. It would have elevated the storytelling. And this is a film, and I don't usually say this, but this is a film that I think could have likely benefited from like 20 to 30 more minutes, because there are things that were underdeveloped.
It's almost 2 hours
time
already.
It
is very long for its time. It's almost 2
hours
already. It's like 158 or something.
It was like 140 something. Yeah, something like that. And it's even still, I think. But here's the thing: like, does it really need more time, or did it just use the time it had poorly?
No, I think it used the time poorly. I mean, maybe you could have gone to 2 hours, or whatever. But I think it used the time poorly.
It's overly dramatic on character deaths. Even characters we don't care about, like like when he stabs through the post and kills whatever his name is. Tyrion, right. And it takes him like 20 seconds to collapse. And it's like, okay, yeah, move on. We get it.
It's like, man, oh man, that is
same kind of a thing for. Well, anyway, like, no, it does not effectively use it. The other thing, too, is, like, there's a lot of great scenery. I don't know where they filmed this. I'm sure it's not New Zealand at the time. It looks like it's probably in the UK.
Some of it was in Scotland, and then...
Scotland, okay.
It is a beautiful...
A lot of it was in
Scotland. There are some absolutely amazing vistas, and it felt to me sometimes like the... if you're going to focus all of that time on travel... You better make the movie about the journey, just like the Lord of the Rings.
And it's not.
Like the Fellowship of the Rings.
No,
that is not what
this
film is about, right? But they spend a whole bunch of time lovingly
they're in a boat. Okay, why are they in a boat? Why are we watching them in a boat?
Oh, they're climbing a hill to go stand next to a horse. Oh, they're walking across a hill silhouetted against the sky. Oh, they're walking across another hill silhouetted against the sky again. Like, okay, it's a beautiful landscape. It's a harsh, forbidding, majestic, wondrous landscape. We get it. But that's not the story. That's not what the film is about. Okay.
It's fighting this dragon that over and over again. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And and I think, unfortunately, even though I have a love for this particular theme, and even though I think that this movie really does some things to hit the theme home in ways that other stories haven't, with regard to like the 5 different Dragonslayers, and it speaks to faith, and it speaks to regency, and it speaks to, individual craft. It's like there's a lot of things that it's speaking to with regard to the past going away and making way for the future. I think that it ultimately was a little too removed from the subject matter because it was paying too much mind to the themes and concepts that it was trying to communicate. And I think that it was detrimental to the story overall, because it just, like, okay, they're there, I can see the themes, I get it, but like, this guy's a big old jerk, and I think I don't care about him. Like, why should I care about him? Why am I going to root for him? You know what I mean? He's like stripping this poor old guy's clothes off and throwing his pack on the ground. He's boasting, and it just, there are definitely some issues that.
Well,
yeah, but I mean,
and he doesn't really ultimately take out the dragon. I mean,
no, he doesn't. He doesn't.
That's the problem that you find out, because you do have the idea of a mentor and the death of the mentor, which I know in the chat people have been talking about Obi-Wan and things like that.
Yeah, I have seen that.
This movie doesn't give you, whereas Luke comes into his own. This movie doesn't have our hero come into his own because the mentor comes back, and it's not. I don't even think that's well foreshadowed.
No.
I mean, they're like the lake of fire, but that's not.
Yeah,
that's
the
what,
only
oh
thing
my god! Okay, because if he can't make the journey, like, okay, if that's gonna be the deal, like, oh my god, then if that's gonna be an important part of this movie, then I'm gonna make him like lame. Club-footed, like whatever. That okay, I'm about to go out there and he can't even like how. And then he says, "I'm not worried about the journey," but like you obviously can't walk, which was not this guy's problem. Like,
right.
You need to play that up, and then when he dies, he's gonna be taken with his ashes or something like that. But that wasn't even played up.
Even spurt and this is a thing where some of the smaller things need to, like the film needs to go through, the screenplay rather needs to go through a few more edits, because he even picks his staff up, then looks at it and says, "No, they would think me infirm," and puts it aside. And that is like absolutely undercutting everything else that happens later on.
Right.
Just one little thing. It stuck out to me, especially on the second watching before the stream. It's like,
no, he needed to be very visibly infirm.
Yes, I mean he was frail, but he was also still powerful, and it didn't sound
Right. So, but then, at the end, okay, he comes back and he's back for a long time. And then like am I wrong that it's not really foreshadowed that destroying the amulet blows him up?
No, you're not wrong.
Yeah. Okay. I was about to say, I watched that again. I was like, okay, like that was not foreshadowed. That was not included.
Neither was the significance of him actually, like the only line we get that actually foreshadows that that casting the ashes into the burning lake would do anything isn't even specifically related to them. It's the guy who, whatever his name is, who ends up becoming the priest at the end of the movie. He calls him the all-powerful necromancer.
Yeah,
one time, and that was the only mention we get of that in the entire film.
Yeah, and it was in the beginning, and it was around the campfire, and it was very much a throwaway line. And for all we know, that's all that this particular character has regarding experience with sorcerers. Like, it could just be a word that he knows from, I don't know, some jerk over in the next country over. Right. And he was just using it because that's what he knows sorcerers as.
So you don't have that. So our hero Galen, I guess that was his name, right?
Galen,
So Galen never gets his Luke Skywalker moment with the Death Star. Like, in order to make the movie work, like, it needed to be Galen destroying the dragon in his Luke Skywalker moment, and instead it was the guy who Obi-Wan Kenobi comes back and does a bunch of stuff, and there's something that's unforeshadowed that blows up the Death Star, and that doesn't work. So
no, it doesn't. And what's with the fake tension on that? Like, there's so much fake tension built up at the end of the movie. I feel really bad tearing this movie up the way that I am, because I really do genuinely love it, right? But like at the end, when Ulrich tells Galen, "Oh, you'll know the time," and then Valeria's like, "Do it now. He told you to do it." And they're like,
I was like, "Okay, do it. I would do it now." Like like there was no information in the movie about when the time would be right.
Right, and they I guess they trying to sort of ratchet tension up, but it's like, look. Dude just had a storm roll in. He's getting breathed on by dragon fire. He's fighting back with lightning. Like, it's a pretty tense situation as it is. I don't need these constant cutaways to these two bickering idiots about when to blow the amulet up. Like, I just don't need that.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. No, I understand. I understand your hesitancy about, okay, we're all of a sudden being very critical of this movie, even though there is obviously a lot that is key points and things that we remember. But I do think you could teach a course on, let's compare this to Star Wars.
I completely agree with that.
And if you're like, why? Because yes, I mean, the dragon is amazing, all of that. Like, I was reading, they spent 25% of their budget on the dragon. And I mean, and yet you didn't have something that captured the general audience the way that Star Wars did and turned into this. And it could have been. It absolutely could have been.
Oh, hey, Doug's here.
Hey, working tonight. Typing up for it. Yeah, he wasn't able to get this work done because of the cool things that happened over the weekend. So, but great that you're listening, at least, Doug. We're definitely going to miss your Heroine's Labyrinth insights on the behaviors of Valerian and Elspeth in this film. Although I will say, Valerian going into the dragon's lair to grab dragon scales to make the shield. Is vaguely analogous to Ariadne and the Labyrinth in and of itself, guiding the hero through to success.
Oh, sure.
I mean, that was the first.
Dragon's Lair is a literal underworld.
Exactly. Like,
it is a very literal underworld. It is a crack in the earth that leads to a fiery pit. Right. Of,
Earth. How did that get unearthed? I guess the dragon just shoved all the rocks out of the way. Well, the actual entrance was not altered at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's interesting too, because actually, this is a conversation I had with Cameron about the story that I'm going to be working on when November starts. That he had come up with, which I was aware of when I was rewatching this. He was like, "Okay, you also have. I mean, I've got a hero who's going to slay a dragon. Not exactly a dragon, basically a dragon. Okay." And Cameron said, you need to have this person fight this dragon at basically the midpoint of the story and fail. Yeah. And I was aware that this happened in this movie, where you had him go, like, his first encounter, he fights the dragon, not directly, but at the lair, collapses everything over and thinks he's won, but has actually failed. So I was aware of that. That's an interesting plot point that he comes up rather quickly as far as the movie goes. They don't wait for you to have your fight. Like, Luke Skywalker doesn't try to blow up the Death Star halfway through the movie, and fail.
Right. Okay. But he goes into the belly of the dragon to retrieve the princess.
No, he does. Right. Yes. But he doesn't directly no, I'm ready. I'm going to go fight the Death Star and then fail. He does go up against the dragon and thinks he wins, but ultimately fails.
So this is where Princess Elspeth discovers about the lottery earlier on, sacrifices herself, is taken into the dragon's lair, and he goes and rescues her without fully slaying the dragon. And then like essentially that would be Star Wars, right? He would go into the dragon's lair, extract the princess. He would have a brief encounter with the dragon, in this case Darth Vader, and let's say not actually slay the dragon, but be able to successfully escape and rescue the princess. Or maybe the princess dies as she does in this film, and that provides some kind of a overriding impetus to try again. But in this film, it's interesting that he combats, quote unquote, the dragon the first time just by bringing down the mountain on it. He never actually sees it in person, and fails. Then he combats it a second time with all of the magical, like literal magical weapon, magical spear, plus the dragon scale shield, and combats it a second time, wounds it, but also fails for a second time to actually kill it. And then the actual resolution is his mentor resurrects himself. Like the only reason he was there was to just toss the ashes into the lake.
Right.
His mentor did everything else.
Right.
And then goes and starts casting lightning bolts out of the storm clouds into the dragon, and then allows himself to be picked up because he knows he's a bomb. I mean, and he never said, I don't know. It's yeah.
And none of this is ever explained. And it would have been really easy. It would have been really easy for him to say, hey, look, I'm a bomb. When you know, that's the detonator, that's the kill switch. When you hit that switch, I'm going to blow up. So I'm going to let the dragon catch me. Like, how long would that have taken him?
They needed to connect those two early in the story, like in the opening act.
He needs to hold it out to Galen or something and say, "This is the key to my power. It holds together all of the magical forces which I command. If it were ever to be broken, so would I be." And then there you go.
So this guy's a lich then, right?
I mean, something
like
that. That's a phylactery.
He's all-powerful necromancer with a phylactery.
Right. And then when you destroy the phylactery, he ends up, I mean, he explodes in grand fashion. I don't know if that's really, typical of a lich, but like, it seems, and also all of the magic that Galen performed with the amulet in hand was really Ulrich performing the magic, which is why he couldn't turn lead into gold, right? So when the king was trying to turn all those bars of lead into gold, it wasn't working.
Nothing was happening
because he can't do it.
And that's and when he abjured him by, what did he abjure him by? He was speaking Latin first, and then he said, "I command you by the authority," I forget. But he cited some other source of authority, and the amulet burned him because Ulrich was inside the amulet, right? He's like, "No, screw you. That's not a legitimate authority." Yeah. But we never knew that was what was happening. It was just like
this is all external to the film. This is like reading stuff.
2020.
Reading into it. Right. Yeah. So the lesson of the film that should not be learned, they were like, okay, we had this amazing, all these special effects and whatever. We had science fiction or science fantasy, whatever you want to call Star Wars, but science fiction. We had fantasy, and nobody came to watch the fantasy, and they all came to watch the science fiction. So we got to go with science fiction movies. That's the wrong lesson to be learned. I think it's a much more foundational story, much more foundational lesson about storytelling.
Yes,
I completely agree. Like, there are some topics that just stir the imagination. There are some settings or some themes that just people really latch onto. And you can tell a bad story within those themes and within those settings. And even though your story's bad, like, you shouldn't think that, well, I'm never going to write fantasy again because I guess I sold more sci-fi books. It's like, that's not the lesson. The lesson is you sucked at fantasy and you should maybe try to hone your craft because people love fantasy. People love Arthurian myth. People love those sorts of things.
The people who loved all that came out for this movie.
Yes,
if you love Dragon Slaying and you love King Arthur, if you wanted to see that on screen, you went to see this movie, and it became an influential movie.
Pivotal. Yeah, there's tons
for reasons other than
yes,
100%. Yeah, there's a reason that generation, and I was too young personally to be involved with it, sadly. Also, I was raised in a very strict household where we didn't even have a television up until I was a teenager. But there's a reason that era, like the go-to films are Conan the Barbarian.
Yep.
Excalibur, like you guys were talking about.
Yep. I love Excalibur, and I don't care.
Dragonslayer, and other lesser known, lesser impactful films like Cull and whatever else.
Beastmaster.
Yeah, like, but at the same time, you go forward another 30 years, and the Lord of the Rings movies that Peter Jackson created were some of the most successful films of all time. This archetypal storytelling it always transcends its medium to resonate with the audience, and the only thing that keeps it from being a blockbuster is the fact that it's a bad movie that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
It's like Pacific Rim. It's like Honest Trailer's Pacific Rim breakdown, right? They end up saying, "Come and see either the dumbest awesome movie ever or the most awesome dumb movie ever," right? There's like Pacific Rim is a modern B movie. I love it. It's fantastic. It hits all of my notes: giant monsters, giant robots, all of the things. It's not that great of a movie, but it's fun, man. I enjoy every single second of it. And that's the same thing with all of these movies. It's not that great of a movie, but it's enjoyable. You can enjoy every second of it.
And that's not to say that it's not total dog water, right?
Like it's the spectacle, right?
Yeah, it's not total dog water. There are good things about the film, right? Like it's filmed on location. All of the effects are practical. Like
it brings in
really
aspects of St. George the Dragon. I mean, it brings in aspects of very classic and archetypical storytelling.
Yes.
It doesn't
and the more you can do
on
that
them in its own story.
And the more you can do that, the more powerful it is. Like Pacific Rim is not going to be remembered in 2 generations as fun as it was. But something like this movie will still, I think, continue to find an audience despite its weaknesses.
I would agree with that.
I think it will
employing archetypes, even if imperfectly.
Yeah, I think it will because of its time. Sometimes you have things that occur because of its time. There wasn't a lot being made in this genre in its time.
Right.
So if you wanted to see a fantasy film in 1981, what did you go watch? This.
Yes,
okay. Right. So that's why, to everyone who loves fantasy, this is an important movie. But my lesson still remains that why is this one not Star Wars? There are fundamental storytelling reasons.
There are,
yeah.
I think it's a stronger film than something like Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim is a total popcorn film. There is no real archetypal. There is some character-based storytelling, but nothing archetypal. And
it's because
character-based storytelling will involve you in the moment and will attract a large audience. But archetypes are what makes something last.
Yeah, and there's no real
classics exist.
It has a theme, but it's like it's not really trying to say anything grand. It is trying to be a popcorn movie. It is trying to tell a cohesive story, but it's not. Like, there's no commentary on society. There's no commentary on
Pacific Rim. You're talking about?
Well,
I don't know.
For sure. Like there are underlying layered themes in Dragonslayer. Like, whether or not they intended it, there are layers that you can peel away, just like we were starting our conversation with earlier.
Mm-hmm. And here's Doug saying, I always think Dragonslayer is a visual film. The world seems
100%
tangible atmosphere. Completely agree.
100%.
I mean, there is that.
Real.
Like the world was real. I believed that the villages were real. I believed that the Regency was a real Regency. There was a real kingdom, real dragons. Yeah.
I was getting flashbacks, quote unquote, flash forwards, I guess you could say, although personal flashbacks to the Northmen, actually.
Oh. That's a really good juxtaposition, I think.
Interesting.
No, but I mean, am I wrong? Like, there's that.
No.
There's this harsh, bleak reality that is absolutely engrossing.
Yeah.
That bleak reality, that harshness about it sells it to you. Like the world, I almost like one of the reasons that the Northman works so well is because they do not make the metaphysical aspects, the supernatural aspects explicit. Right. There's always this kind of question where okay, this is what the main character is seeing for sure, but is he insane or is this actually happening?
Right. How reliable is it? I just looked it up now that you brought it up. I just looked it up. Northman runtime is 136 minutes. Talk about using your time effectively.
No kidding, man.
Yeah. It came in under Dragonslayer. So Dragonslayer, I agree with Heath, I agree with your juxtaposition against Star Wars, but I think there's also this second one to make against the Northman, because it does a lot of what the Northman does, but the Northman is just so much more effective as a film and as a story, because the way that it utilizes the camera, because the way that it utilizes the real world mythologies, because I do believe the world is cohesive in Dragonslayer, just like I believe it's cohesive in the Northman, but it communicates so much more in a less time, and it's so much more effective. That's really that's a really great juxtaposition. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that.
I've thought about that quite a bit, like the use of time in general, like how much time do you need to communicate something? And really, I have been using the original Star Wars, but whatever, like, oh my God, I got the story I got to tell. I'm going to need 5 hours to tell it or whatever. I'm like, think about everything that's the original StarArs did in, roughly 90 minutes, and on all of these really incredible movies that can do something in 90 minutes or less than 2 hours,
Yeah.
And they really can. And so you can do a lot in that amount of time. Like, oh my God, I can't communicate my stuff. I need 10 hours worth of whatever. You probably don't. A really good story can be communicated in 90 minutes.
I think Mars Express it comes in at 89 minutes. I think.
It's really short.
It's very short, but is it packed? It's absolutely packed.
But I mean, that's fairly typical for an animated film of that level of quality, because if you look at all the detail they're putting into the character animation and motions, even though it's still animated on twos, it's very, very work intensive. So by the nature of how long it takes to produce just a single minute of animation, even a single second of animation compared to film, you're going to get a shorter. I mean, that's one of the reasons that some of the real outstanding filmmakers come from animation. Phil Tippett, of course.
Oh yeah.
As relatable to this particular conversation, Phil Tippett, obviously animation. Brad Bird, outstanding storyteller, works in the medium of animation. You have to be efficient in animation because everything that happens on screen is only because you put it there. It's a lot of effort and a lot of work. And this Dragonslayer, if you like, one of the reasons that the Northman is so good is because not just efficiency, but making every frame matter and making it communicate in a way that can only be done in a visual fashion. So the whole idea of every frame a painting, Northman actually fits that.
Yep.
This film is pedestrian filmmaking. The shots exist merely to move to the next shot in most cases. There's one outstanding scene in this entire film when the convoy arrives at Erland, and you have that statue of the dragon, Norse style. This is one of the reasons that I flashed back to Northman, is because that dragon statue is very Norse in style.
Oh yeah,
and
Erland even is a very Teutonic name.
Yeah. It feels Viking adjacent in some ways, and if they'd leaned more into that aesthetic, maybe it would have worked better. I don't know, because the Saxons would have been in Britain at this time anyway, so it would have fit. But it pans up that statue, that dragon's carving, and it's leering over, facing to the left of the frame, curving downwards. And then Galen walks up and he looks up, and they have that profile shot of him low in the left hand of the frame, looking up, and just like there's a straight line cut right across the frame that directs your eye up towards the leering dragon statue. That was artistic. That was like that was a genuinely good, well-blocked, artistic filmmaking shot. Like an auteur made that. It's the thing about the difference between this film and The Northman is that almost every shot in The Northman is like that, right? Yeah. Like almost every scene, like it is specifically blocked. They divided the frame and they put the foci of the frame in one part or the other, or they split them, or they direct your eye by the way that the characters are arranged and the way the camera moves through the scene. Like there is forethought put into the shot. Dragonslayer, it's a B movie. It doesn't have that forethought. They're purely functional.
Yep. Yeah, I thought about your shots and your cinematography in a few different places, and I think that's an excellent point to bring up, Titterpig. But I think it's about the same time when the bad guys,
Viking adjacent.
when the bad guys, who's ultimately getting killed or whatever, and there is that that scene, and then you pan and they're across the water and they ride across the water into the encampment. You know what I'm talking about? That scene?
Yes.
That's all one shot. You look over and you see them and they ride across, and I'm like, any kind of like modern filmmaking, you would have had multiple shots of them coming across the water in this more. But that's the efficiency or whatever of this. That okay, we got one camera.
Well, there's that too.
Here we look over; those are the bad guys over there. I mean, it works. I mean, it does work, and they ride across. But it's like, okay, I was very aware at that point that like, okay, we can't take other cuts of them coming across the water to make them more intimidating, or other views of them or anything like that.
And even if you only have to do it on a winner, you can frame it differently. Like, okay, a medium length static shot as they ride across the puddle and get it going to town is functional. Like if you were thinking about it in some kind of a dramatic and memorable way, you could still do a oneer, but you could do something different. You could frame it as a close-up. You could actually track with them. I mean, there are ways you could do it that would make it more involving than just sit the camera there. Here's what happens next. It's like
that water actually bothered the living crap out of me.
Why? What?
Because it's in the middle of town. Why is it full of water? It hasn't rained the entire movie. It doesn't make any sense. They just wanted an action shot of horses running through water, but like it just really, really annoyed me.
Especially after it's been burned by dragon fire, right?
Yeah, sure. Something. It's just
somebody's cistern got destroyed, and that's
that's a big cistern.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. You're right as far as Heath. There are some things where the fact of the film is low budget, and the fact that they spent a quarter of it on the puppet, or not just the puppet, but the dragon, making the dragon in its various incarnations.
It's one of my favorite screen dragons of all time, though, if not my favorite screen dragon. It is weighted heavily toward practicality. My skill.
However,
but I like blowing 25% of your budget is like
the other film. To me, it's a film that I correlate.
Don't put your money there.
Yeah.
You didn't have the story right.
Yep.
Right.
I understand what you were trying to do, but you didn't have the story right, and then you spent 25 minutes on 25% of your budget on an incredible dragon.
Yeah, it looks great. It's a great dragon.
The movie didn't work.
Yep. Yeah. It's like the other film that I kept correlating this to in my head is Dragonheart. Sean Connery and
it's been a long time since I've seen it.
And Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen it as well.
Dragonheart is a far better movie in all ways than Dragonslayer, in my opinion. It has a similar theme, the whole idea of the past dying out and giving rise to a new order. Mm-hmm. It does reference Arthurian myth in an ancillary fashion. It's not as, I don't think it's quite as layered, but I think it is a far better and more effective film. It happened not long after Jurassic Park. So it is also one of the, it is also in a similar position, like you had Empire Strikes Back come out the year before Dragonslayer, and that was where Go Motion was first put into a feature film. So the same kind of a technological innovation, Dragonheart came about not long after Jurassic Park actually used CG to create on-screen full-body
3 years later.
creatures. Yeah, exactly. It's about 3 years because Dragonheart works better, not just because of how believable. Like even today, you watch Dragonheart and Draco looks, other than maybe one, possibly two particular scenes where he's a little not quite joined with the VFX background, like the matte isn't quite perfect. Draco looks like a real character, interacts like a real character. I can't even think about how many times my family and I watched that film. It's also more family friendly. Like there are some dark things that happen, but it's not very gory.
The dragon's very human. That was what.
Yeah, the dragon's freaking Sean Connery, man.
I know, the dragon is actually Sean Connery.
Yeah. So instead of calling me dragon in your tongue, you'll call me a dragon in some other tongue. But I kept flashing back and forth between Dragonslayer and this movie, is just like I did with The Northman and just like I did with a few others. But honestly, like this film is a retroactive melding of The Northman to Dragonheart in a lot of ways. And if somebody did that and really committed to it and could, back it up with a solid screenplay, good characters, and just commit to that kind of level of action, right? That kind of brutality. You'd have a banger of a film on your hands.
Let's do it. That's us. It's our calling.
Yeah.
So we gotta finish the diamond, right? You have Dragonslayer on the point of the 1980s, and then it splits off into Dragonheart, and then the Northman, and then we got to bring the diamond close to the other end.
Yeah.
I remember going to see Dragonheart with my uncle and aunt, the same one who showed me.
I love that movie.
Like along afterwards, and like somebody's getting shot with an arrow or something. Like somebody's getting killed by an arrow in the beginning of Dragonheart or something like that, right? I mean, it's been a lot. I've only seen Dragonheart once, but like somebody gets killed by somebody gets shot right early on in the movie, right?
There's okay, so what happens at the beginning of anyway? Go ahead.
Well, somebody gets killed in the beginning of the movie,
yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
The prince's father gets killed.
And then my aunt was like, "Are you okay? Do you need to leave?" I was like, "No, that person just got shot with an arrow. I'm fine." Like, what are you talking about?
No, this is great. Shoot another one. Shoot another one.
Yeah.
Am I okay? Do I need to leave? What are you talking about? Like, this is fine.
Is this the same uncle that you saw Dragonheart with?
No, that was my aunt. That was the aunt.
Or not
that was my aunt who asked me. I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, do I need like?
Yeah, no, that was the king rides out to put down a peasant's revolt, and he gets pulled off his horse and stomped to death. And then the prince tries to ride in to save him, gets shot in the chest with an arrow, and it nicks his heart. So they take him into the dragon's lair, and Draco, on the word of the knight of Dennis Quaid's character, takes part of his heart and places it into the prince.
I remember that now. I'm remembering that kind of thing. Like I think I only saw that movie in the theater.
Yeah, I only saw the movie once. I did not see it in the theater. I think I was working.
I've seen it many times. That might be one That might be one that's worth going over too. Actually.
Yeah, I'll put it on the list. Why not?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I love that movie. It's a great movie, and the effects are outstanding. They took just like Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park still holds up today, although if you know what you're looking for, you can still see some of the the differences between like the value ratings, the value differences, and that kind of stuff.
I mean, okay, but I'm still saying that Jurassic Park that's the movie that shows you that you can do special effects
100% believable
today. Like that movie, even Return of the Jedi still holds up today in ways that some of the modern Marvel movies not.
True, absolutely true.
If you're just talking about special effects.
It's the difference between recognizing the weaknesses of the effect and playing to its strengths and trying to hammer it into a square peg into a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
But Dragonheart is groundbreaking in its own way in that Draco is the first character 100% CG in film.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Because like the T-Rex was CG, the Raptors were CG, but they were also practical and they were also puppets and they were also like and they were also just individual prosthetics, like a dismembered tail or whatever for a particular scene. Draco is the first character in film to be 100% computer generated. And he absolutely holds up. It's a great movie. Anyway,
I'll have to rewatch it.
Yeah.
You guys want to get to some comments?
Please. Okay, yeah, sure. Bring up some comments.
All right, cool. I got a couple of them starred here. So
okay, all right. We'll
rewind a bit. PH says, do you think the film portrays the fall of the dragon as symbolic of paganism's end and the arrival of a new religious order, aligning with the historical transition to Christianity?
1,000%.
Yes, but I think that it is in conjunction with both the king deciding no longer, well, I guess he doesn't decide that he doesn't want to do the lottery anymore. He sort of doesn't have to do the lottery anymore. So it's the passing of an old kingdom, which very much would have been tied into a sort of theocratic idea. And also, I think more Ulrich represents paganism, right? Because he is a practitioner of the old way. He is the sorcerer. So I think that all of those things combined indicate what PH is mentioning, but it's, I think, a combination of the three.
I mean, that's why it's a layered movie, right? There are different approaches and different perspectives upon the basic theme. Like, there is a lot going on in Dragonslayer as a movie. It could have been so much greater than it was.
Oh, yeah. Well, right. That's the theme, right?
That's what I'm saying. I'm very impressed by your analysis of the theme of Christianity and the paganism and all of that going on, because I was not thinking about any of that at all as I was watching. So it could be PHS, and so because I was just so overwhelmed by why is this not working as a story? That was completely overwhelming my analysis as I was watching and the notes I was taking. I would be interested to know, like, maybe I would be interested to know what the writers were thinking. You know, what they were, because they could have been. I mean, they could have been thinking about all these things. On the other hand, I think it's completely possible they weren't thinking about any of it, and they were hacking together aspects of like St. George and the Dragon and this and that. I don't know what they were thinking.
I think I actually don't know. I can totally follow your thought process on that, because it felt like they were trying to create a delivery vehicle for their technical achievement of the dragon.
Yes, right. Yes.
Like, this film exists to show you a dragon.
To show you
the entire first half where the dragon doesn't appear is to build up to show you the dragon. Well, okay, but you really should have gotten some kind of a screenwriter to make sure that first half landed, so that when the dragon appears, like, we have some emotional investment in it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's
another thing. Like, we never really saw the destruction wrought by the dragon, right? We weren't given anything to fear. We weren't given anything to fret. It was literally just, okay, so here's this one girl who's pretty afraid, and the horse gets away and the cart gets crushed. But like, we didn't you don't see what happened if you don't give the virgin.
Yeah, exactly. Which can work in a film. It can work in a film like Alien, right, where the fear is of the unknown. But this is not an unknown. This is something that has been a problem for 1,000 years.
Yes, And also,
so
like,
when you
say dragon to an audience, you are establishing a very specific expectation.
100%. There is that. Like dragons exist in every culture across the planet, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
In all aspects of history, this is a very interesting phenomena that I won't get into here. But like, though the alien plays the role of the dragon in the story, it is a cosmic horror. It is the fear of the unknown at its core. Like this, we are going out into places we have never been. We do not know what to expect. When we do encounter it, we cannot relate to it, and we cannot anticipate it, and we cannot prevent it. Right? Yes. That is not the case here. The dragon is a known quantity for millennia.
I mean, it's been
centuries,
right?
It's been placated. It is a known quantity. The fact that we know how to interact with it in such a way that we minimize its damage, that we minimize the effects, and it's like, so I feel like they tried to take the technical achievements of the Star Wars movies and marry it to the filmmaking or the storytelling of Ridley Scott's Alien, which happened 2 years earlier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not understanding the difference between an archetype, which everybody understands, and the unknown, which nobody understands, and trying to tell the story in the latter of the former. Like
that. That's a great point also, because I love putting these in the context of other movies in the timeline.
Oh yeah,
Alien being 1979, this movie doesn't technically get to Alien.
Oh no,
not even close.
Yeah,
I mean, there are scenes which are close, but there's a whole there are the matte lines and
I mean, honest to God, like it doesn't.
I mean, it's showing you a dragon, which is why we all love it.
Yes,
right.
But like,
you're right, it doesn't technically reach Alien.
No one's even really scared of the dragon, right? They're kind of just like they're tired of it. It's like, yeah, there's this dragon, we kind of don't like it. Could you kill it for us, please? Like they're not terrified. Yeah. They're just they just are sick of it.
When they're near it and it's throwing a tantrum, then they run away and hide. But other than that, it's like, well, it's the dragon. It's up there in the mountain, and we feed it maidens every 6 months, and it's fine. And our crops.
Apparently going to its lair isn't even really all that big a deal, right?
We'll be fine if we hurry. It's like whatever.
It's not a huge deal. All right,
and two people we see, Galen and Valerian, both enter its lair and come back fine.
Yes.
So, like you wouldn't be able to walk into the alien nest and come out fine by yourself.
Probably not. Probably wouldn't come out at all.
No.
PH again says the final scene where a cross is visible might suggest that Christianity brings hope or progress, in contrast to the archaic sacrificial practices, and then. Some poltroon responds to that and says, for sure, the blacksmith gives his daughter Valeria a cross to wear too, even though she's the main one who sought out the old magic source. Yeah, absolutely.
So that is the demarcation point of where the film transitions its power, and that's the other thing too. Is like that happens before the confrontation with the dragon. Thematically, I suppose it works, but dramatically, it saps the importance of the final fight, because the blacksmith is giving the symbol of the new faith, the arising faith that even he doesn't actually believe in. Obviously, he hasn't even been baptized at this point, but he gives it to his daughter as she's leaving with the sorcerer's apprentice to get out of the influence of the dragon. It says. And it's a tacit recognition that this philosophy is going to take over the world.
No, for sure.
It's not an expression of actual faith. It's the same idea as making the wicker dragon heads and offering maidens to the dragon. It's like here's the symbol of the thing. Here's the symbol of the metaphysical power. If you wear it, it will protect you, just because. That's the way the things are going in the world now. Like it can't hurt.
He says it's exactly what he says. It can't hurt.
It is not an expression of faith. It's a good luck charm. It's like, okay, here's the other form of luck that's now coming into the world, and if you take it with you, then then maybe the fact that you went to find the sorcerer who was killed before he got here, and now you're stuck with this apprentice dude who can't kill the dragon, it won't hurt you. So, good luck. I don't know. It's like something like that needs to have some kind of actual significance, and it actually undercuts the themes, in my opinion.
Well, I will say this. PH, going back to his original comment, says the final scene where a cross is visible might suggest that Christianity brings hope or
that is
progress in contrast to the archaic sacrificial practices. It is still in and of itself an archaic sacrificial practice. It's just a very specific sacrifice.
It is a sacrificial practice. Well, it's okay.
That's a can of worms. It's a can of worms,
and I will leave it.
I just wanted to crack a joke.
It is no, but you actually and as many jokes do when they actually land. You touched on something is the alteration of a form of capital punishment into a symbol of hope is an incredibly archetypally powerful. Is an incredibly powerful archetype, right? It is archetypically resonant, and
it's martyrdom. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, it is martyrdom, yes, but it is not just martyrdom. It is taking the form in which you were martyred and making it the symbol of the salvation of anyone else who would engage in that same path. And that's a whole different discussion, but I just wanted to touch on that because that's one of the reasons Christianity took over the world. No other form of martyrdom did it to that level, to that effectiveness. Anyway, it's very interesting that they tie the dragon directly to Lucifer.
He does. Right.
Which Ian McDiarmid, by the way,
I can't believe we haven't mentioned him up to this point.
2 years later, he appeared as the actual emperor in Star Wars.
Yeah,
I know. Actually, that was one of the first note that I made because, like I said, I had not watched this since I was like in 4th grade or whatever. I was watching the credits and it said Ian McDiarmid, and I immediately stopped the movie and I went, "Wait a minute, who is Ian McDiarmid in this movie?"
I mean, as he was. Yeah, I had actually forgotten he was in it, and then I watched it again, and I was like, I recognize that guy. Oh, wait, and as soon as he starts berating the dragon, I'm like, that's Emperor Palpatine. That's Senator Palpatine, right? It's Senator Palpatine.
No, I mean, as soon as his face is so recognizable.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was Googling that, and I was like, Brother Jacobus is like his name, Brother Jacobus. But then as soon as he showed up on screen, I was like, oh, that's Ian McDiarmid.
I know exactly who that is. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway. Sorry, go ahead.
No. It was just funny as he started rebuking the dragon. He kind of transitioned into Palpatine mode. Like you could see where Palpatine came from because this was his first appearance in an American film, I think, and then he became the Emperor in Star Wars. So
very funny. They saw he was a good holy man, so I guess they made him a.
There you go.
A worse holy
bad
man.
Holy man. Bad holy man.
So Factotum says having the conflict between the wizard being the mentor of the last of his tradition, as he opposes the evil counterpart to wizards using a power that's being lost to the universe. Having the conflict the wizard being the mentor.
I read that comment earlier, and I'm not sure what. To be honest, Factotum, please put it.
I think I'm missing. Yeah. I'm missing something here.
I mean, he is.
He does later on. Just recently, he says maybe they were aiming to fleshing out Beowulf's death by dragon.
I did see that. There's a couple of comments between that. I have a couple more here from him. So let's do one more from PH, and then we'll just stick to Factotum. So PH says. I think Galen and Valeria, she's Valerian in the beginning of the film when she's a boy, and then Valeria towards the end when it's revealed she's female. Shows some growth, but the film doesn't emphasize deep character development. Correct.
No,
it focuses on themes, yes. Atmosphere, yes. And maybe the hero's journey. I don't even know if it really focuses on the hero's journey so much because
there's a truncated hero's journey going on.
It's a truncated hero's journey, but it also completely blatantly ignores many
kind of tries.
Yeah, it kind of tries, but it kind of ignores. It doesn't really care.
It's more like a morality play. It's almost like a Punch and Judy show in some ways without the comedy.
I love
right?
Punch and Judy. I can't believe you just brought them up. I absolutely love Punch and Judy.
But I mean, isn't it though? Like it is a morality play. It's almost like Just So Stories by Kipling, or like it is very fairy tale in its structure. Everything exists as a cipher for a particular moral lesson. The real problem is, like, that can work. Like, the problem is that you don't fully commit to the idea that this is in fact a fairy tale.
I don't know. I'd have to think about this, because I don't, with Christianity being on the fringe as it is for the majority, it's kind of like it's something that's going on in the world in the background. Like, Christianity is overtaking things.
Yes.
It's clear, it's obvious, it's brought up several times throughout the film, not really focused on until the end, right?
But I don't mean
we're watching Grail's journey, but like
but I don't mean morality in the fact of morality as far as Judeo-Christian morality. I mean a morality play.
Right, a story with a moral. I know what you mean. I just don't know. I'd have to think about this a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, because here's the other thing that I was also connecting this with is like, oh, it's a Grimm fairy tale. Like, structurally, this is a Grimm's fairy tale, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that we're talking about all the weaknesses of the story and the characters and blah, 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 blah. And yes, even in archetypal form, it doesn't follow what we have been conditioned to recognize as the story arc of the hero's journey in full. But if you go and look at the actual fairy tales that resulted in the Arthurian Round Table and St. George and the Dragon and so on and so forth, that were carried forth from that kind of oral storytelling tradition, it's very much still it's just a straight up fairy tale. Things happen because they need to happen. They're wondrous because they have to be wondrous. They're dangerous because they have to be dangerous. That is what they are. Like, they are, the root of archetypes comes from that kind of childish storytelling. And I don't mean childish in a bad way, only insofar as that they are basic story elements that anybody can identify, because we've been taught them as a means of information transfer that instinct does not do for humans. Right?
Okay.
And I feel like that this movie is trying to operate on that level, but it's also trying to operate in the modern form of, this is a delivery vehicle for the cutting edge in special effects.
It's definitely trying to deliver. Go ahead.
I think it is. I think there is the element that it was trying to give you the hero's journey we had in the very beginning, the mentor, this unlikely hero. But then it's if Obi-Wan comes back and blows up the Death Star, it didn't work. It was
right,
trying.
No.
I think there's absolutely an element of trying to tell the hero's journey here, but for some reason. Which is an interesting idea about this wizard who kills himself because he can't. Like, all of that's an interesting idea, but it was not executed well.
Right. It's like you had. It is as if you had Obi-Wan confront Uncle Owen, and Uncle Owen killed him. Then he came back to confront Darth Vader so that Darth Vader could kill him again. Okay, you're hitting the beat too often, right?
Well, whose story is it? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like at that point,
is this the master story, or is this the apprentice's story?
Yeah, it's the master taking agency and crucial decision making away from who we've been following the entire time as the protagonist, right? It's a very, very
unmotivated protagonist.
Yeah.
A what?
Yes.
A what protagonist?
An unmotivated and
unlikable protagonist, and so it's like it doesn't work on those levels. It just doesn't work.
And that may be one of the fundamental disconnects too, is because even in fairy tales, typically the person who you're following as the main character has a very, very strong motivation. Like the Little Mermaid, her motivation is she wants to love the human prince, and it ends in most fairy tales end in tragedy in some way or another. They either end in total happiness and they lived happily ever after, or they end in tragedy. And where the point of focus character never gets anything that they want and is just punished, right?
Well, I knew this was going badly as I was watching when he shows up and says, well, hey, like, my master's dead and his quest is my quest, and so whatever he was doing, I was like, that's no reason for you to go in.
Right, yeah. Like, it's still, yes, again, even fairy tales still have a very some kind of a strong motivation, even if it's just to prevent their own starvation. And that is not the case with Galen. Like, he has no strong central motivation, even a fairy tale, even though the rest of the story in Dragonslayer plays out very much like a fairy tale. Things happen because they need to happen. And there's nothing wrong with things happening because they need to happen. We don't have to have a plot that has no holes. Like, you can look at numerous successful films, stories, books, whatever else.
Yeah, like
that have plenty of holes, and everybody buys it because we follow the motivations, and we follow the fact that the motivation, or that the events validate those motivations, right? So the key about a fairy tale is that you have this strong central motivation, and either the motivation is virtuous or in and of itself, or it is a vice in and of itself. And then through the events that they go through within this fairy tale, the world dictates to the person that their path is virtuous or vicious. And either they do not deviate from the path, and if they're on a virtuous path, then they achieve the rewards of being virtuous, or they achieve the punishment of being vicious. Or if they are on the vicious path and they change, then they can achieve the virtuous reward, and that just further reinforces the path of virtue. Or if they switch from virtuous to vicious, then they are punished, just as anyone who started out vicious, and that still further reinforces the value of the virtuous. Does this make sense? I hope I'm making sense.
I think you're making sense.
Okay. So then if we take that structure, even the fairy tale structure, and we put it on Dragonslayer, what do we get?
Oh, I don't think it's a fairy tale. I think there are fairy tale elements, but fairy tales usually have some sort of moral or lesson.
Yeah.
And there are like, I think there's over 100 different fairy tale structures. I actually looked it up once a little bit ago to actually do a little research with one of Heath's streams. It was Heath and Brianna, and I can't remember exactly what they were discussing, but I specifically looked up fairy tales and fairy tale structure, and there are like over 100 different structures to different fairy tales. So I don't know if that necessarily applies. I think that everything that you said makes sense for sure. And I think that with the subjective nature of film, you could certainly get that out of the movie. I just don't think it's not something that I necessarily considered with regard to the film.
Because I agree. And the PH is chiming in and saying Ulrich is the main character, and that's the lesson. Like,
he's not the main character, but he's definitely the one that resolves the quest, right? So, like, we have a main character,
protagonist, or however you want to. Okay. Go, Jay.
We don't even.
I was just going to say that he, Galen's the main character. He's the protagonist. He's the one we're following, but Ulrich is the one who ultimately resolves his quest, right? And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Heath. I apologize. If you have something to say, please do.
No. That was it.
Okay. I apologize if I trampled on what you were going to say. So we can go to Factotum. It's important to remember when we watch a setting ending a pagan magic past in favor of the coming of Christianity, it's all from a perspective of culture that emerged from the Christianized world.
Well, sure.
It's like modern culture romanticizing older cultures with anachronistic beliefs about the past. Sure, I totally agree with that, and I just wanted to highlight that comment because I do definitely agree.
Yep. No, nothing we're saying here actually flies in the face of any of that. 100%.
And then Factono, and then this was probably a timely comment, and I can't remember exactly what point he said it, but he says, an example of going the other way is the book Ursharak. They tried to make a hero's journey epic, but I can never make myself even get halfway through its ham-fisted formula checklist.
I can't even comment on that because I have no idea what Ursharak is. This is the first time I've heard of it.
And I'm sure that it was a timely comment, and I didn't get to it in time, so my apologies.
Probably.
When Charlie Gardner says, when the dragon found its slain offspring and the camera got the anger and rage, goosebumps. It's that was a pretty good moment.
That was a great moment. I mean, that was great. Yeah. But that was part of it, like, oh, then the children or the offspring will have to die too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then it reinforces that by having them.
But I still think I would have hit that even harder because I wasn't clear. I think I would have hit that harder because I wasn't clear that the dragon wasn't going to kill him until he found out the children were dead. Actually, that's a story point in what I'm writing now and working on, the death of the children of the monster. But I would say in mine is clear that actually the monster is not going to kill the hero until the monster realizes the hero has killed the children.
The alien queen.
Well, and that's like, it's kind of.
I actually think that undermines the themes as well, because the idea that this is the last dragon, it is ancient, it is dying, and once it's gone, then that era of the world is gone. And yet it has 3 cubs.
It does have children. That's a good point. That's
if those are allowed to grow into full strength, then there will be 3 more vermithrax pejoratives flying around, continuing this old aspect of tyranny.
Yeah, and it definitely humanizes the creature because it's really like it is, quote unquote, according to the film, the last of its kind, and it's trying to not be the last of its kind, right? It's just trying to nurse its young. It's trying to bring them to full strength so that it's not the last of its kind, which I guess it does hit on the theme, right? Because there is this aspect of there is an aspect to humanity of wanting things to stay the way they are, of not wanting change, of wanting to resist the change. And so this is sort of kind of a way of the change being resisted. But like, I agree. I don't, they were not necessary, right?
They weren't.
They wanted to have puppet baby dragons, so they had puppet baby dragons. They didn't need them. It didn't need to be in the movie.
And as a way for them to represent some sort of threat for Valeria without her having to try and face the actual dragon and have to run away and figure out how she escaped again.
Right, but like, here's the thing: it's like when you're going over those sorts of scenes and you're trying to determine exactly how important to the film they are. Like, if nothing of consequence happens, then it can probably be cut.
They're
right?
so
she goes to the mouth of the lair. Yeah. She's collecting scales. The baby dragon pops out and scales her, or scares her. But she's still able to collect the scales. She still fashions a shield. Nothing really happens with regard to the baby dragon. Probably could have just been cut.
As soon as the baby dragon pops out, it cuts and it goes back to them to honing the spear, and we never see her again. They're trying to. I can tell what they're trying to do. They're trying to create tension. Like, oh my gosh, is she okay? Oh no, did the baby dragon kill her? And then the next time we see her, it's her throwing. We don't even see her. We see the shield land on the ground, and then she's standing up there and she's fine. And she doesn't even say anything about it. It's like, what the hell?
You have so the spear, yes, someone goes, but does make kind of a difficult journey to get the shield.
Yeah.
Which is not the case with the spear. I was trying to decide what the symbology of the spear is. Like I said, significantly to me that, okay, we have a hero with a spear and a scaled shield. But, he says, the blacksmith, have you ever made a weapon? And they pull this spear out of waterfall,
out of the river,
or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But that's very different from Obi-Wan Kenobi giving Luke Skywalker his lightsaber. I mean, we never had that I remember. Like I said, I just watched it again. There's no significance to this spear. I mean, it's very sharp. Like they demonstrate this very sharp, but it's not like, oh, this blacksmith is the only one able to create a weapon that can kill this dragon, and you can have it. Like I don't remember that in the movie.
You just I think you may have just hit maybe inadvertently, I don't know, on the way to fix this movie. The at least for
before you go there, I want to make a very brief comment on, and this is probably me reading into it. It's a little esoteric, but like, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe a sword and shield actually fits into the theme better, right? Because sword and shield is very Roman, and we get past that in history with, we move on to swords, we move on to bow and arrows and whatnot. So like kind of, I guess, relying on a sword and spear, or pardon me, shield and spear to slay an ancient villain maybe works, but it also maybe doesn't, right? Because if the idea is that the past gives way to the present, then it likely should have been something different than a spear.
Yeah, well, the spear is not the warrior's weapon, though, right? The spear has always been the weapon of the line infantry.
I think I understand the spear, because and then why like this hero that I've got has a spear. I'm not sure about that, because when I think about paganism, I think about spear and shield. Because we've got the idea of the Germanic warriors being given his spear when he is, comes of age and things like that. When I, when I think of Christian tales, I think about King Arthur and Excalibur. So when I think about paganism and earlier tales, I think about spears. When I think about later tales in Christianity, I think about swords.
I agree. And that's kind of the point that I was trying to get at. But I think that I was...
So you're saying that if this is about the transcendency of Christianity, then it should have been a sword.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Well, gotcha. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it should have been a sword, a quote unquote more modern weapon, a more period appropriate weapon defeating the villain of the pack.
And then the blacksmith hands it to him. He's like, I don't know how to use this.
Right. Like I feel like that maybe would have been a little bit more appropriate with regard to theming. However, you can make an argument for a pagan weapon being used to destroy what effectively amounts to a pagan adversary. Foe. So, same defeat.
You're matching.
You can make the argument. So, I'm just making that observation. And
also, I
interrupted Sable to do it, so I apologize.
No, you're totally fine. It's a totally valid argument, and it's actually something I was also thinking of as the film was playing out too. Because I would absolutely choose a spear to take on a dragon. Functionally,
makes sense.
I would not choose a sword to take on a dragon, and yet the spear is also, especially the spear shield combo. It's one of the reasons that the Romans used it early on. It's one of the reasons that the Greeks used it almost exclusively. It's one of the reasons that the Zulus used it. It's one of the reasons that the spear shield combo has been the default configuration for warriors, or even not even warriors, but just people conscripted into fighting in some way. Throughout history, a spear doesn't take a whole lot of skill to use. You point, the pointy end goes into the other man. To quote doggone it, I want to say Inigo Montoya, and that's not him. The guy who played Zorro in The Mask of Zorro, Antonio Banderas. I could see his face, and I kept trying to say his name, and it came out Inigo Montoya. But anyway, to quote Antonio Banderas' version of Zorro, the pointy end goes into the other man, right? There's not a whole lot you need to know more about a spear than that. And there's that whole fight scene with the guy with a sword and no shield fighting Galen, who has a spear, and I'm like, I've watched... I know how those weapons were used. I've watched fights between them, both in SCA fights, the Society for Creative Anachronism, and in classic European martial arts recreation and all that kind of stuff, the spear always wins unless the unless the swordsman is supremely skilled and knows specifically how to fight them. Like, there's a reason that spears have been the default weapon, because you can use throughout human history, you can use them for hunting and you can use them for combat, and you can be very effective with a very low amount of training. So there's that aspect too. It also it does play into the fact that Galen is not a warrior and doesn't really know what he's doing. What are you going to give to that guy? It's going to be a spear. It's not going to be a sword. A sword requires quite a bit of training to use.
Yeah, a sword's more personal. It requires a bit of training. P.H. Arbeck says St. George kills the dragon with a spear. This is very Catholic. Here's the thing, though, right? Catholic. Well, hold on. Here's the thing. St. George pierces the dragon's heart with a spear, but he slays it with a sword.
Right, he cuts his head off.
So that even, I think, is maybe better with regard to this story, because if same defeats same, but then he defaults to the progressive, the more Christian associative weapon to actually slay the dragon, probably would have been a little bit better with regard to the theme.
That's also true.
That's very interesting what you said, James. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. But when P.H. Arbeck's comment came up, my thought wasn't St. George mounted?
Yeah, he was.
Okay, so when I think of a mounted person with a lance, I think of something Christian. If I think of someone on foot, then I think of pagan. So if you're talking about, you're right. So there is something else. I think that's fast. To me, that was interesting. That if you think of, like, I don't think of pagans mounted with spears.
Yeah,
they're fighting on foot with spears. So you're right. So that'd be interesting. And then James's comment on top of that. But that if I think about mounted combat with a lance, a spear or lance, I think of Christianity. But if I think of foot combat with a lance, I think about paganism more often than not. Okay, some ideas of English knights in the 100 Years' War fighting. But I'm just talking about in general, generally speaking.
Right. The cultural impression, the zeitgeist of that thing.
Yeah, I think ultimately what we're drilling down on here is that there could have been a more effective use of the symbology of the weapons in the film to better speak to the theme, because it's a little confused.
So you do have the king with the sword who puts it in the at the end.
That is true. We do have the king who did use the sword.
He doesn't do it. We do have that. He's the sword.
So going way back before all of this to Heath's original comment, here's maybe how you fix the story of Dragonslayer. You make the apprentice of the sorcerer, the tomboy, appearing to be a man, and you make Galen the son of the blacksmith who forged the blade that can slay the dragon. And you spin the story off from those initial starting points, because then you have the son of the blacksmith taking up what his father always envisioned as being the freedom of his people, but doing so under the influence of the beautiful woman who comes to him in distress, even if she appears as the powerful mystical apprentice. She holds the sacred fire, that weird magic that nobody can do anymore, right? And she might be the one who forges, who blesses and hones his weapon so that he can actually slay the dragon.
Yeah, this might be fun to do a script clinic on. I think this might be really fun to do a script clinic.
I agree.
P.H. Arbeck responds in saying the spear plus sword is only one version. It's actually a couple versions of the story, but such is the way of myth. You get it one, you get them both, you get the other. But he's always mounted, I think. And so, speaking to Heath's observation that he usually associates the mounted spear with Christendom is still, still relevant.
Yeah, the traditional, when you say St. George, it's always the vision of a knight with a shield on a spear, riding on a horse, wielding a spear.
On a spear, riding a horse?
On a spear, riding a horse. Whatever.
Wow,
you know what I mean.
I know what you meant.
Wielding a spear, riding a horse.
Look, if I can get made fun of for my slip-up, so can you.
Absolutely. Sometimes your mind outruns your words.
Yes,
because that's not a pagan thing. When I think about the spear and shield on foot, that's seems to be a pagan.
Yeah, well, because here's the other thing too, is that in order to support something like cavalry, you have to have at least a systematized agrarian society. You have to have something that can consistently produce enough fodder to support the horses, to support an army. And that does not happen in the typical societies that we in our current culture associate with pagan, which are much more at the whims of the elements and the tides of nature, so to speak. There is no culture that produced horses as a weapon of war until the Europeans. So that becomes an iconic part of their storytelling / mythic or archetypal imagery. And, not even China. Like China had horses, right? Like Asia had horses. None of them made them a core part of their military strategies until Europe was able to produce the amount of fodder to support, to allow one person to support their own mount, as well as fund the creation of their own suit of armor.
I was about to say, how does that relate to the Mongolians? That's what
yes, the Mongolians are a nomadic culture, right? They are not agrarian at all. They are a nomadic and key raiding culture. Their entire way of life is built upon taking the resources available in the lands into which they ride, not the ones which they produce themselves. Which is why they were viewed as an existential threat by everybody they came in contact with. Like the difference between them and Europeans is the Europeans were able to create a society where one person as a lord could inculcate within his population the type of infrastructure necessary to support a cavalryman in armor. And that is why things like the winged hussars arrived.
Makes me wish I knew a lot more about the history of warfare.
Oh, yeah.
You got a lot of reading to do.
When do we never not have a lot of reading to do, man? I'm way behind myself.
It's eternal. It's eternal.
It is eternal.
But that's the reason that kind of Arthurian knight exists. The original Arthurian mythos didn't have that style of knight, but the idea of the Gothic knight in full plate riding with a sword and lance on the back of a horse and a shield and all of that, like that is extremely Eurocentric.
It's interesting that that's when I'm thinking about the stories, and I mean, you guys will probably beta read 4 of which are pagan. Okay, their main warriors end up mounted, but they don't fight mounted.
No, almost never.
In the story, they are mounted infantry. They will use their mounts to get to the battlefield. So that they'll use the mounts for strategic movement, but that once they actually arrive on the battlefield, they fight on foot.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the modern
it's very iconic.
Modern military, like that was a very transitional period in military development as well, because modern military functions much the way that the old pagans did. Like we have the mounts, which would be, say, either the APCs like a Bradley or something similar, or an M1A1, and either you stay on the mount and you're reliant on the weaponry that you carry with the mount, as in the tank, or the APC carries you to the battlefield and the infantry disembarks and does their thing while it peels off and either goes and gets more infantry or it provides long range support. Like the armored knight and the iconic representation of that sort of invulnerable warrior that had all of the weaponry he needed to handle anything only occurred in two places in human history up to this point, and it is Europe in the Middle Ages, or it is Sengoku Jidai era Japan with the samurai. And both of those were highly cultural, but those were also highly economical based on the situations in which they occurred. Anyway.
P.H. Arbeck says, these are the ones I know of, cultures who used horses in military before Europeans. And then he gives a laundry list.
Okay,
I don't know. I don't know so much about the history of warfare to be able to
bring those up.
But I don't know if we should necessarily break down into the history of warfare during a film.
That would be very interesting, though, because like the cataphracti were a thing for sure, and they were the kind of the progenitors of the European knight for sure. But again, they came from what ultimately resulted in the Byzantine Empire. Like, you have to have a certain amount of infrastructure to support that kind of a military force, and typically you had if the fighters stayed on the horse, then they were archers, or the horse was again or whatever means they used. Like, of course, you could go off into the east and you could talk about elephants and whatever.
Yeah, I honest to God, I think this is a topic for another video.
Anyway,
it's like
as you may have noticed, this is a subject that I love, and I do not want to derail the conversation.
No, it's no big deal. It's a very interesting conversation.
The cataphracti existed. I recognize that. It's not the only time in history that horse-mounted warriors occurred, but it in general was a rarity, and it did not become a cultural touchstone.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we may be able to end. And Factotum makes a point. He says it's expensive to keep horses and make swords, but you can put an iron knife blade on a pole and fight on foot.
And that's 100. That is right. Yes. I was
something very Celtic about a spear.
Yes, there is something very Celtic about a spear, and Greek, and African, and Roman, and yeah. Spears they're great weapons. They're one of my favorite.
They require very little training to use effectively, and they are a force multiplier by the factor of their design. And by that, they always have been, and I suspect if projectile weapons ever become not accessible to the large majority of the population, I think they always will be the weapon of choice for just the average person who does not make a career out of being a warrior.
That makes sense to me.
Maybe we'll get to try that out one day.
Yeah. Hey, we should start a spear society, right? We just fight.
Yeah. Big stick energy, man.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that this is probably a good stopping point. We're over 2 hours. I think we discussed the movie through to the end. We nailed quite a bit. Heath, I'm so thankful for you being here for this, and
yes,
again, deepest apologies for not having you and not having invited you sooner. This I would like for this to be, an open invite. If there's ever a film that we're discussing, because you had made mention that Sunday nights can be good for you, so
they can potentially be good for me right now.
I don't want to write anything on your schedule. Just if you see a movie that you're interested in talking about, or a topic that you're interested to talk about, doesn't even have to be a movie, and you would like in, I'm very, very happy to have you. I'm very grateful for you being here tonight. I'm grateful for the influence you've had on me to even start the channel. So I would love to have you back as regularly as your schedule would allow, but that's I'm not asking for as much as that maybe sounds like. And Sable, thank you as always for being here. Next, I think we're going to be, I think this Wednesday, it's going to be Jax, Ben, Sable Phoenix, and myself. Yep. And we're going to have another RPG conversation. Right. Heath, you're welcome to join in on those as well. I don't want you to think that, it's just Sundays. So if you want to be included in that, please, by all means, I'd love to have you on again.
Thank you.
But I think we're going to go ahead and end here. I think this was a great conversation. I absolutely love the movie, even though it's not great.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me a reason to watch it because I needed to before I started writing.
Sure, of course,
trying to watch and read before I started writing again, and this is one of them. So this was a reason to actually get it done.
Ah, well, what's another one?
Well, they were things like the Iliad and the Odyssey that I've been trying to get through.
Like gotcha.
So
okay,
this was one of them that was a film. So this made it happen.
Thank you, PH, and thank you, Factotum. I appreciate your attendance.
Thank you,
everyone who was in the chat. I really do appreciate it.
I think it is a credit to the depth of the comments that we would hit one and then just spin off of it without getting to following comments.
Yeah.
So if we missed important comments, I apologize. It was just you guys were inspiring for our discussion.
So thank you. I'm going to hit end stream, and then of course you're going to look at my dumb face for seconds before it cuts out. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Heath. Thank you again, Sable. Thank you again, chat. Thank you if you're watching after the fact. And I'll catch you all on Wednesday for sure, but definitely in the Geekverse Discord.
Yep.
Pardon me, the Raven Keep Discord.
The Raven Keep Discord.
Yeah, I don't think I have a link to that in the description, so I'll have to add that if that's okay.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and take care.